Hello, I'm Alistair McIntyre, and I'd like to thank you very much for visiting this project website and watching this video. And at the same time, I'd very much like to thank Martin of the Scottish Family Business Association, who represents some 43% of all Scottish businesses, for helping to put you in front of me to listen to this proposal. Essentially, what I'm trying to do is a fairly massive web project that electricscotland.com is uniquely able to do, unlike the vast majority of other Scottish websites, because we're essentially a very big hub in the world, and we know we contact people like members of parliaments from all over the world, senators, congressmen, billionaires, millionaires, tons of middle management, all kinds of people. So we're able to give some very significant exposure to Scotland and its family businesses. But the whole purpose of this is to illustrate that if we can get behind this project, which does need some time and effort to make it happen, I believe we can genuinely make billions of a difference for Scotland, and hence the family businesses in Scotland. Now, my premise is based on the fact that our institutions in Scotland and our members of Parliament and so forth are doing a terrible job of promoting the country worldwide. And therefore I think it's time that we thought out of the box and did something different to raise our awareness. And I believe by doing that, there is a very considerable amount of money that Scotland can make. And I'd like to tell you just a few stories that I believe show how we can do that. I'd like to start off by telling you one quick story about inward investment, for example. The story is that I was running my own family business in Grangemouth in Scotland. Grangemouth happens to be an oil and chemical town. Now, over the years, because of new technology and everything like that, old plants have been decommissioned, new plants have been built. As a result, there's quite a lot of brownfield sites that are available for development in Grangemouth. And the oil and chemical industry there got together and said, well, why aren't more chemical plants coming here? And so they hired a marketing guy to find out why and then to do something about it. And while I can give you absolutely tons of details about this because I was involved, I can tell you that when he came back from his survey of talking to the people that made the decisions on where to build chemical plants in Europe, and bearing in mind that it was estimated over the previous 5 years something like 172 chemical plants were actually built in Europe, so he was trying to find out why not one of them had come to Grangemouth in Scotland. So when he interviewed them and talked to them and then told them about Grangemouth in Scotland, he came back with firm belief in his mind that if they'd known about Grangemouth in Scotland, that something like £1.2 billion worth of new chemical plants would have been built in Grangemouth in Scotland. So that is a penalty for Scotland not being visible enough, that we're not even in the loop when people are considering capital investments. I want to tell you two more stories about which I feel are indicative of the opportunities that are available to us. But because we're not getting ourselves noticed and talked about, it's just not happening. The first story I should tell you is about Scotland the brand. Now, some of you will remember Scotland the brand. It was created to see whether we could use that to promote Scottish products. But one of the first things they did was they needed to know the perception of people around the world to Scotland. And where on a personal level we got high marks for being a lovely historic country, great scenery, great people and all that kind of stuff, when it came to business perception of Scotland, it was an absolute disaster. I mean, vast majority of people thought we were a third world country and had no business infrastructure at all. I mean, it was appalling. We were even asked, do you have television in Scotland? And I mean, I know we might laugh, but you know, that's by no means the first time someone's asked that question. And so the perception of Scotland from a modern business society point of view is very low indeed. And I want to illustrate the problems we have in Scotland because our institutions simply aren't thinking out of the box and addressing the modern world. For example, if I take a visit I was making in Kentucky doing business there, This particular evening, I was working with a guy called Steve May, and we went across the border to West Virginia to have dinner this particular night. And the place we went, the governor of West Virginia and his wife were in, and Steve knew them very well, so I ended up having dinner with them. And the governor's wife is very highly involved in the education in the state. And so I had to mention, because I'm in the online world and have been for over 25 years, I said, you know, it's a pity our kids couldn't get involved in online projects, because that way, you know, the kids would get to learn about other countries and people in them. And I tell you, she's as sharp as a knife, because she not only said that would be a brilliant idea, Alistair, but she said it has major possible repercussions for tourism and business. And I went, what do you mean? He said, well, think about it. If the kids are getting involved with each other, they're going to make friends, aren't they? So what happens when it comes to holidays? Quite often it's a family decision where you're going to go for your annual holiday that year. And of course our kids were saying, can we not go visit the friends we're making in Scotland? And equally well, hopefully the Scottish kids will be saying, hey, can we not go to West Virginia to meet these friends I was making online there? So tourism. But she says, you know, America's very much business orientated, so many of the parents of these kids are business people or are working in business. And of course, I would imagine the same applies to your parents in Scotland. So when they get together, there's a good chance that business could be transacted. So she said, if you can make it happen in Scotland, I'll guarantee I can make it happen in West Virginia. So I remember coming back absolutely enthused about the whole thing. Thought it was a brilliant idea. And after several face-to-face meetings and about 70-odd phone calls, I reluctantly had to accept that it just wasn't going to happen. But then the next story to me was even more disturbing. I was invited to give a talk at the Scottish Weekend in Moultrie in Georgia. And they were paying my airfare over and going to be putting me up. And they also asked me if I'd stay an extra week so they could show me around the place. And I was more than happy to do so. So having done my talk at the Scottish Weekend and enjoying the event, they took me down to Florida. Now, unbeknown to me at the time, what they'd actually arranged was that we were going to the Jacksonville Highland Games in Florida. And I was staying with Bill, the chairman of the Games, and his family. But I was apparently the official guest of the Games and got a big write-up in the Highland Games brochure. But what I discovered is when I went to the Games, and now bearing in mind this is the first Highland Games I'd ever attended. I'd never even attended one in Scotland before. But I was gobsmacked and amazed. I felt there were more Scottish flags flying at that one event than were probably flying in the whole of Scotland. I couldn't believe it. The other thing I couldn't believe, there was about 50 different clan tents at the event. It even occurred to me that America was so big into Scottish clans. And of course, when they were going to these Scottish clans, what you actually got was people were asking about, you know, where the clan was formed and where their ancestors might have lived and all this kind of stuff. You know, and I thought they're doing a fantastic job for Remote Scotland at this kind of thing. But after the event was over and we were back home at Bill's place and we're having dinner, he said to me, you know, Alistair, you were the only local Scot there that I'm aware of. I said, I can't understand why your tourism people and business people weren't represented. Because he said, think about it, you saw yourself the clan tents, people are getting enthusiastic about where their ancestors might have come from. If the tourist officer was there, he said, I'm quite sure a lot of them would have gone over to say, hey, how can I get to this place in Scotland and have a holiday? But he said, equally well, he said, you know, we're a business nation in America. You know, this is a family day out, so the mother and father can well own businesses or be significant in businesses that are already here. And he said they're touching base with the roots and everything like that. But if there was a business tent here, I'm sure a lot of them would like to have gone over and found out what Scotland was doing on the business front, but no business representation. And he said further, because I was so puzzled about that, I made some inquiries. And I found that there were some 300 Highland Games every year in North America, at which you get anything between something like, at the very worst, 10,000 people coming, but at the very best, 250,000 people coming. And yet, in all my research, I can't see any event, these events that tourism or business have been represented. He said, to me, it's a phenomenal missed opportunity, and I really don't understand why they're not doing something about it. He said, the only thing you might get is the odd whiskey company might sponsor a tasting or something, but that's about the level of it. But he said, the reason I was keen for you to come is that I wanted to ask if you could do something. He said, I read your weekly newsletter. He said, I don't always read it, I don't always have the time. But he said, you know, I certainly will read it when I get the time to do so. But he said, if you could profile in every weekly newsletter a Scottish company, I would make an absolute point of reading it. Because he said, not only might I be able to do business with them personally, but I might be able to do business through my business. And as you know, my business is very large indeed, and I am a multimillionaire. So it's a very big and successful business. So there's no reason why I couldn't use Scottish products or Scottish services if I knew about them. But the sad fact is, I don't know about them. And he said, I did a wee search one time, but he said, it's really impossible to find Scottish businesses. And I don't really have the time to do the research. So he said, if you were to profile a Scottish company each week, I'd make an absolute point of reading it. And he said, if I found someone of interest, and I had friends or colleagues, he said, I'd be happy to pass on that newsletter to them for them to read. But he said, you know, Alistair, there seems to be a misconception in trade delegation. You can only talk to the big CEOs. Yeah, there's a whole layer of senior management, and for that matter, middle management, that have multi-million-dollar budgets. And he said, a lot of them would be able to order products or services from Scotland if they knew of the Scottish companies. But unfortunately, we don't know who they are. So I said, do you think you can maybe do that when you get back to Scotland? Is maybe do a feature on Scottish companies? I said, I'll certainly do my best. I can promise you I will try hard when I get back to do that. Now, I have to say that when I got back, I went to the usual sources, Scottish Enterprise, Scottish International, Scottish Chamber of Commerce, Visit Scotland, the local councils and Parliament, members of Parliament. I got absolutely nowhere. I actually wrote a letter, a real letter, and I put a stamp on it, to 200 Scottish companies asking if they'd provide me with information about themselves. Got absolutely nowhere, nothing at all. And I personally can't understand that. I mean, if you're trying to get yourself in front of a new customer, when you get an opportunity, by its very nature, you have to tell them a bit about the background of your company and why you're a good company to deal with, and then you've got to make a sales proposal as to the benefits of your products or services to that company. So all that information presumably is already there, so why can't you send me it? I'm not asking you for any money to do it. Maybe that's why. I keep saying, this is free, it doesn't going to cost you. I think if I have the time to pull it together and send it to me. So maybe you're suspicious about free, I don't know. The whole point, however, is Electric Scotland is a major educational and research hub for Scotland. Now, the websites on its own aren't going to get the numbers of visitors that I get, and you're not going to get the breadth of visitors that I get. I mean, after all, what's the purpose of a website? It's really got two purposes. One is to be a support mechanism for your existing customers, and the other one is to try and attract new customers. That's the principal reason for having a website. But unfortunately, an awful lot of websites don't do very much to support their customers, and really don't do a very attractive job of attracting new customers. So that's a bit of an issue. But however, Electric Scotland is that type of hub, because in the normal day-to-day operations, I'm going to be talking to senators and governors, members of various parliaments in the world. I'm going to be talking to a lot of CEOs, billionaires, millionaires, in the normal course of me doing business day by day here in North America, which is where I'm based. Nowadays, I used to only get 4% of my traffic from the UK, but now over 20% of my traffic now comes from the UK, which is pretty amazing growth. But they come from obviously all the principal places that Scotland settled. But I do have people coming from over 200 countries and territories in the world. And they're coming here to learn about something to do with Scotland. And that's where I have the advantage. I'm in this big hub of the Scots diaspora all over the world. And I'm well known and well respected. So if I was to sell Scotland on my site, I mean, I can do that. Whereas a lot of other websites just can't. And the proposal I'm putting to you needs money, and it also needs effort. And the reason I'm saying that is that if you were to look at this page you're looking at the moment on the site, you'll see I have a big advert, big banner advert, which is something like 720 by 90 pixels in dimensions, and that is devoted to Google. But I have to say that's on the header of the site, and it's on every single one of my tens of thousands of pages on the site. Therefore, it cannot be missed. It therefore makes me a considerable sum of money. All the advertising in my header makes me a very happy guy, because I'm making big bucks off that. And that is where the money comes in. Because I'm suggesting that we need to do a whole series of great, interesting articles about every single industrial and commercial sector in Scotland. And if it takes, and I'm suggesting we average it as a 20,000 word article, complete with up to 50 great high resolution pictures and even videos if we have them. And if it's going to take you 5 such articles to fully explain the sector, then 5 articles it will be. But you use that site because, I say, instead of reading 300 or 400 people coming to read it, an article, every single visitor won't be able to miss it. So we change the graphic each week to reflect that week's article. And that space is big enough to put some really good teaser words and stuff in there that would attract people's attention to click on it. And my concept is, when they click on it, it goes to a very special landing page where that week's article is prominently listed in the top of the page where they click to read it. But on that page is every single other article we've produced in the series. And not only that, by the time we've finished doing the project, all of those articles will be a permanent part of the site. Therefore, it will be a permanent educational resource for anyone wanting to learn about Scotland and its business infrastructure and tourism infrastructure. That's basically my proposal. But to get those articles written, we need to find really good people that understand each of the sectors. And I say this is the other half of the equation. One, I need to be financially compensated for giving up that space and thus my earnings from that space. So I need to be fully compensated for that, because I'm not about to lose money just to promote and give business to Scotland. I at least want to get my money back on that. But I say the other thing are articles. We need to find really good people that can read the articles. And therefore, every sector should have someone in there who's known for knowing everything there is to know about the sector and can write a really engaging article. And as I say, if it takes 5 articles to fully explain the sector, it takes 5 articles. But I think we need to write about the background, a little bit about the history of the background of the sector, up to what it's doing today. And in there we should be highlighting the major players and some of the significant new players that are coming into the scene and the opportunities in the sector and what Scotland's doing about it. That's what we want to be writing about. But there's no earthly reason why we can't do a mix of articles. So the aim is to cover every industrial sector and commercial sector in Scotland. But on top of that, there's no reason why every 4th week we might switch it to news from Scotland. Now there may be great breaking stories about a new medical breakthrough or a research breakthrough in environmental situations or something like that. I mean, we could tell some really stunning stories, and these could be interspersed between as we start to promote Scotland and make Scotland more aware, people are aware of more of what Scotland's doing in the world. Right now is the best time to do it, because Scotland is getting a much higher, shall we say, publicity because of the upcoming referendum. The reason I say that is that there's quite a number of countries around which are concerned one way or another about this referendum. For example, I know that it's being discussed in the Department of Defense in America. Why? Well, unfortunately, it's negative from the point of view that they're going to come out of NATO. They're going to kick the nuclear weapons out of Scotland. That has defence implications. And we need to know more about this. And when you read various articles, they're all about the repercussions to Britain as well as to Scotland. But nevertheless, if you're now seeing Scotland mentioned somewhere, you're getting more interest. And of course, naturally, I'm getting a lot more visits to my site due to that, which is brilliant. So if you're going to see Scotland mentioned, people are more inclined to be interested in the information. This is why doing this project now capitalizes on this increasing interest around the world, and I think we want to capitalize on it. And I say, to be honest, you can't rely on the traditional business institutions in Scotland and the traditional tourism trade to do it. We need to take charge of our own destiny. And that's basically my proposal. Come on board. I need someone or several someones to fund the cost of the project, which is going to be £3,000 a month. And I would reckon we'll be doing this maybe over a 2-year period. May go longer if you see value in it and start to see really good results. But remember, these articles not only profile the sectors, but can also profile companies within the sectors. And there's no earthly reason, if you want to pay for it, is to also use them to just feature a particular company, if you want to do that. I mean, one of my favourite sayings is that you're only held back by your imagination, essentially. And if you can't see the future, then you can't adapt to it. And as I say, on my site, if you're doing research, you know, I can show you by doing actual research on my site how you can figure out how to fix the education problem in Scotland. It's very obvious when you start to read the biographies of these famous, really successful Scots in the world. I can even show you parts of the site where there's an autobiography of a guy that literally single-handed opened up China to international trade. I can show you another Scot that actually, in single fell swoop, opened up European knowledge of the way the Chinese think, because he translated all the Chinese classics and made a major contribution to increasing our understanding of the Chinese and how they think. I mean, there's so many stories about Scots all over the world. And of course, if we're trying to do business internationally, a few of these stories is quite good to break the ice as you're talking to them. And I've got tons of those stories all over the site. That's why my site's used. I'm not selling anyone anything when they come to the site. I'm an information resource, and that's why people come to me. And I'm a research resource. So if you're trying to study what happened in education in the olden days, all of that information is available on my site for you to read and look at and learn from. So there you go. That's the proposal. I'd like to work through Martin at the Scottish Family Business Association. So maybe if you like this video or like the proposal, certainly I'd encourage you to pass it on to friends and colleagues that might also be interested. And as I say, certainly talk to Martin, and let's see if we can find a way to pull this together and actually do the project. Because it's way past time that we took charge of our own destiny. And as I say, I genuinely believe that there is billions here to be made for Scotland if we can raise Scotland's footprint in the world. So there you go. That's the prospect. That's the proposal. I really hope you'll be interested, and obviously I look forward to hearing from you in due course. Nice talking to you, and thanks for taking the time to listen.